Eric Matthews was kind enough to like sit with me and show me, basically teach me the language of Candiria, which was, there's a specific style and sound, and it's really not extremely complex, but it's very different than the way most metal bands operate. You know, there's no drop tuning, it's standard tuning, believe it or not, and it's just a way it's the way the band writes. And then there's a 5-string bass, and that has to do with the way the guitar sounds. It's like building chords with different instruments, you know? So that was really it. It was a stressful thing, but once I learned the language, I quickly picked up on a bunch of songs, and we just started hitting the road, and it just got, you know, I just picked up more and more enthusiasm about the music, and then got wrapped up in it, and we wound up moving on and supporting that album for a couple of years, and then writing Process of Self-Development, and here we are. You know, like, no one had ever heard anything like that. No one had ever tried to do anything with, like, you know, ambient moments in metal, just like these weird ambient pieces of music, 9-minute improvised, you know, weird, crazy shit. Like, no one had the nerve or the gall to do something like that. So for me, as a, you know, I own a record label, Rising Pulse Records, and we put the new re-release out on my label. So for me to be able to put that out on my label, for me it's a very important record from a personal standpoint, joining the band at that time, but also from the perspective of someone growing up in the music scene in Brooklyn and New York City at that time. There was nothing else happening like it in our city. No one else was doing anything like that, and I'm proud of it. I'm really proud to have toured on the record, even though I didn't write any of it. I'm still proud that I was a part of supporting it and helping these guys sort of bring this crazy, like, you know, this amazing album to people all over the country and all over the world. Yeah. So, and I feel it, and to answer your question, I feel it holds up. I think it still compels people to push boundaries. I think when young musicians hear it, I still think they're inspired to be like, wow, what the hell just happened, you know? So I still think it has that effect on people. I think we're very fortunate to come from where we came from, to be a musician and be born and raised in New York City at the time when we were coming up as musicians. You were foolish not to absorb it all and sort of like take a little bit from the street musicians that were playing. You're crazy not to just take a little bit from all of it. Or it's hard not to be inspired by it. It really is. Like, we got big into like eating different types of foods and going to Indian restaurants and watching tabla players play and sitar players play, and we took a little bit from that, and African cultures and Latin music. It's impossible. How do you live in Brooklyn and New York or the Bronx or Queens and not be influenced a little bit by Latin music, or, you know what I mean, or African rhythms? It's just impossible. You hear it all the time. Even disco, hip hop. Yeah. You don't realize it, but it's in your blood. I was raised on R&B, soul, and disco. Yeah. Honestly. So, and that has to do with, I think, my attention to rhythm and my attention to being on the beat and being connected to the rest of the band and making sure that whatever we're doing feels right to the listener, you know? Before Beyond Reasonable Doubt, the band was really way more connected to metal, death metal, and other types of metal like thrash metal and those kind of influences. And it wasn't until somewhere in the middle of like beginning to write for Beyond Reasonable Doubt that Carly and Eric made a decision that the band was going to really invest a little bit more in a hardcore style of music. Like, they were inspired by the hardcore scene. They were starting to go to hardcore shows and seeing hardcore bands, and the community and the camaraderie and the pits and that energy was such a huge inspiration to them that they literally decided, we're gonna kind of shift a little bit and change our style just a little bit, and kind of like, you know, they were inspired by it, so they started writing stuff like that. And the reaction was great. The hardcore scene in New York and Brooklyn and Queens and all the 5 boroughs the band was welcomed with open arms, and we really do owe a great amount of thanks and appreciation to the bands that were really like true hardcore bands in that scene, and the crossover bands that like embraced our style and our sound, and were like, you know what, these guys are doing something different, but they're still connected to the hardcore scene. They're still part of this community. So we love it, and we want them on these shows, and we want to book them here, and we want to, you know. So we were welcomed in that community, which was a major part of kind of how we were able to get to the next level even. Yeah. Like the hardcore scene was a massive part of our ability to play in front of so many different people in so many different places. And the way it came about was we have a mutual friend, Chris Santos, who is a chef. He, you know, a judge from Chopped and all of that stuff. He's a very good friend of mine. He's one of my best friends. Oh, cool. And we were hanging out one night and went to see Amon Amarth, I believe, at Irving Plaza in New York City. And after the set, we went backstage to say hello to the band, and Brian was there. And Chris introduced me to Brian, and he was like, hey, this is John from Candiria. And Brian was like, oh, nice to meet you. Like, we've never met all of these years. And I was like, you know, it's kind of funny we never have. And then I left and I walked away and I was like, I wonder if he'd be interested in putting out a Candiria record. Because at the time, we were just, me and the band were just starting to talk about like, maybe we would do something. And then when that came up and I mentioned it to Mike, Mike was like, my bass player Mike MacGyver was like, that would be a cool conversation. I'd be down to hear what he had to say. And then Chris facilitated this dinner at one of his amazing restaurants in New York City. We had an amazing meal. We had an incredible conversation with Brian, and he said, listen, you know, I would love to do something with you guys. Let's talk about what you have in mind. And then here we are. You know, jumping back into it, the whole way we wrote the record was, and it's every record we've ever done is the writing process has been almost completely different every time. A whole new set of challenges and advantages. Every album we've ever done. Kiss the Lie was written under the most extreme circumstances you could possibly imagine, and I'm very proud of that record. But as far as While They Were Sleeping is concerned, with all the different challenges we were facing, we were bringing Dan into the band at the time to help us write the record, which was a huge challenge for him, but he rose to the occasion, obviously. But the thing I think that was the new element we added was Carly's idea for a lyrical concept and a storyline, which we've never done anything like that before, which completely changed our writing process, completely, because now we had to write music that helped kind of facilitate the storyline. And for me, the experience went something like this. It was like, I would present music. Like I got this piece of music right here, it's in 9/8 or 7, whatever it is, and present it to the band, and then it goes into this part, and these are like the rough sketch of this song. Carl would be like, oh, that's cool, I got an idea for that. There's this part in this story thing, I'm gonna take this home and work on it. And he would present it to the band, and then he would explain, like, okay, so now at this point of the story, this is what's happening. This person's coming in, and all of a sudden this is happening. And like, I'd be like, oh, okay, cool, all right. I don't know how the story starts. I don't know who these people are, but fine. Then we'd write another piece of music. I'd present another piece of music to the band, or Mike would come to the table with something, and Carly would go home and work on something. He'd be like, okay, well now this point in the story, this is happening, and this character comes in, and this is happening. And I'm just like, what is happening here? Like, I don't get any of this. None of this makes any sense to me. He's like, dude, you gotta trust me. I'm like, I don't know, man. I just don't know. I really don't get any of this. I would talk to Mike. Mike, I don't know what the hell's happening with the story. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know, man. This is kind of crazy. He's like, I know, dude. None of it makes any sense.
So it's mysterious in a way.
It was mysterious, but you know, the one takeaway from making While They Were Sleeping was, for me, was we have never been more supportive of each other and more like ready to be like, you know what, dude, I have so much faith in you as an artist. Speaking about Carly or Mike, this is your idea. I know I'm gonna love it. Like I know you as an artist, I know you as a person, I know you wouldn't bring anything. Having that confidence in each other, we kind of had that. And it really was a good feeling to in the end when it got mastered and we had the record in our hands, we were like, wow, you know what the greatest thing about this was? How we were toward each other, how well we worked together, and how much more complicated this would have been if that wasn't the case.